The burden of caring too much. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life, as if every step of yours was measured, weighed, rehearsed, just to fit in a mold that was never made for you? Maybe it started in a subtle way. A compliment here, a review there, and suddenly, without realizing it, you started editing yourself. Cut your edges, hide your manias, disguised your desires, just to be accepted, just to fit. But fit where exactly? How many decisions did you make that were not your own? How many times did you look in the mirror and saw someone strange? There are people who spend their whole lives in this silent theater. A well-placed smile, a moderate opinion, a calculated presence. The search for acceptance becomes a vice, and the worst, a vice that disguises itself as virtue. After all, who does not want to be loved, right? But the problem begins when being loved costs being you. And here's the plot twist. The more you shape yourself to please, the more distant you are from who you really are. And then I ask you, who are you trying to please? And if you finally get it, will you still like who you had to become for this? Think about it. How many versions of yourself have been buried in exchange for applause that does not last 10 seconds? What if, instead of bowing to the world, you simply withdrew from it? Not physically, of course, but internally. If he was away from the noise, the expectations, the constant obligation to perform. That's what Michel de Montaigne did. He didn't run away from life. He watched it, like watching a river go by, instead of trying to swim against it. While everyone wanted to teach, Montaigne wanted to understand, not others but yourself. And you know what he discovered? That freedom begins when you stop wanting to please. That living well is not to live to impress, but to live with lightness. It seems simple, but why is it so difficult? Perhaps because people confuse value with validation. He thinks that it only has value if it is applauded, followed, desired. But Montaigne did not write to viralize. He wrote to breathe, to vent doubts, fears, contradictions, to free yourself from the obligation of looking like something. And you? What would you do if you didn't need to prove anything to anyone else? The answer may not change the world, but it can completely change the way you inhabit yours. Have you tried to control everything? Every detail of the day, every answer you will give, every step of the others, as if the world were a board and you the master of the pieces. But what if I told you that this control is an elegant illusion? We try to predict, calculate, anticipate, but Montaigne already learned this centuries ago. Trying to control everything is like trying to hold water with his hands. The more force you make, the faster it escapes. And even then, we follow. We control what we post, what we feel, what we show. We prepare ourselves not to err, not to fall, not to look weak. But at what cost? The obsession with control consumes, tires, hardens, and in the end, life does not bend to our will. It escapes through corners that we do not even look. You realize this when you finally let go. When you put down the wheel and understand that control was never yours, it was never anyone's. And at that moment, something changes. Not because you gave up, but because you finally understood that peace is not in controlling everything. It is in trusting what comes. Then he says to me, "What are you still trying to control? And is it that, when you let go, you would not actually be meeting? Have you ever found yourself living a movie that has not yet been filmed? He has plotted every detail in the head, what can go wrong, what may be missing, what may hurt, and then paralyzed. The anxiety for the future is this, a disguised fear of planning, an attempt to protect yourself that prevents you from living. Montaigne said, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." Pause, breathe, read this again. How many monsters have you created with the power of your imagination? How many catastrophic scenarios have you rehearsed that never existed? The mind runs ahead like an unruly horse, but the body stays, stuck in the now, waiting for a danger that may never come. And what's worse, the more you try to hold on, the more things slip. Control becomes anxiety, anxiety becomes exhaustion, and life passes. Then he says to me, "How many moments did you stop living trying to ensure a future that deep down no one can promise? What if the only way out is to stop running and just be? Since when being loved has become a test? Since when to please is worth more than exist? The truth is that from an early age, we are trained, shaped, conditioned to seek approval as if it were oxygen. Be good. Say what pleases. Don't be too much. And without noticing, you start to hide. To wear versions of yourself that are more palatable, more acceptable, easier to swallow. But between us, how many times have you swallowed yourself just to be accepted?" Montaigne wrote, without filter, without armor. Didn't want to convince anyone, just wanted to understand each other. And maybe that's why he touches us so much, because he wasn't trying to impress. Real acceptance doesn't come when the world claps. It comes when you look inside and think, "I may not be perfect, but I am whole." What about you? When was the last time you accepted without editing, no performance, without apologizing for existing the way it is? Maybe the right question was never, "How can I be accepted?" but, "Who would I be if I already accept me?" Letting go seems easy when we talk, but what about something you thought you needed, of an image, of an expectation, of a love that has become prison? Many people confuse detachment with coldness, with not calling, not feeling, not caring. But it is not. Detachment is clarity. It is knowing what is worth your energy and what is just sucking it. It's being able to look at something or someone and say, "I want to, but not at any cost." And that limit is power. It's freedom. Montaigne was talking about it. Act without obsession, love without possessiveness, seek without getting lost. And you? Have you been searching, or are you lost trying to search? When attachment becomes prison, we begin to bow. He accepts crumbs, tolerates excesses, abandons himself in the name of anything but truth. But what if detachment is actually the greatest act of love? Love for yourself, for that which is light, for that which is real. So I ask you, what are you still holding, which you have been trying to let go for a long time? When did feeling become weakness? When did showing pain become shame, not courage? The truth is that we learn to wear armor too early, hiding the cry, swallowing the fear, pretending strength while collapsing inside. But Montaigne did the opposite. He exposed, confessed his flaws, his doubts, his contradictions. And you know what that shows? Being vulnerable is not falling. It is allowing yourself to be human. No one is constant, no one is unshakable. Everything is in motion, including you. And change is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of inner life, of listening, of evolution. So why do so many people pretend to be always well? Why do we smile with eyes full of storm? Vulnerability is what connects. It is what brings us closer. It is what takes us from this stage of forced perfection and puts on the firm ground of authenticity. Then he says to me, "What are you still hiding for fear of not being accepted? And if precisely what you hide is what else could free you?" Have you noticed how many people love with fear? Fear of losing, of not being enough, of being left behind, as if love was a dispute and not an encounter. We get stuck thinking that we are building something firm, but deep down, it is just trying to avoid the pain. And in this attempt to prevent loss, we shape each other, presses, controls, tries to fit the person in the exact space of our insecurities. But Montaigne already knew true relationships are born of freedom, not possession. It's not about arresting someone, it's about allowing the other to stay because he wants, not because he can't go. But that scares you, right? Because freedom requires trust. It requires maturity, to know that if the other chooses to go, you still remain whole. Then he says to me, How many of your bonds are based on the joy of sharing, and how many are stuck in the fear of being alone? It's hard, I know. But when we love with freedom, the love comes back lighter, more true, more human. And maybe that's where it finally blossoms. There is a moment, an instant that no one tells you, when the fight ends, when you realize that you don't need to force anymore. And that's where everything changes. Fatigue turns into peace. Resistance becomes surrender. Because surrender is not giving up. It is not losing the battle. It is, in fact, to be reconciled with life, with the highs and lows, with the impermanence of everything. This surrender is the wisdom of detachment. It is knowing that we do not control anything, and that everything is fine. When you accept impermanence, accept flow, then you are no longer fighting against what is. You simply flow. And I ask you, what are you still trying to control that is only tiring you? Maybe when you let go, you find yourself. Perhaps by stopping to force, you realize that everything is already aligning. Sometimes surrender is the only way to true peace. And in the end, you realize something simple but transformative. The less you try to control, the more things line up. Have you ever felt that? When it finally releases the pressure, the need to have all the answers, the fear of making mistakes, and suddenly everything begins to make sense. Life does not impose itself. It flows. True freedom comes when you understand that in the pursuit of perfection, you have lost the best of all, authenticity. And perhaps the key to changing the world, or at least your world, is this. Change the way you inhabit yourself. Not with rigid control, but with lightness, acceptance, the courage to be who you really are. Montaigne taught us that when we stop trying to please and control, life begins to reveal itself. And we come to realize that, in fact, we have never been as free as we are now. If it touched you in any way, take a deep breath. Now imagine how many other people need to hear it as well. Enjoy this video to reach who is still losing trying to fit. Subscribe to the channel. Here we do not wear masks, we take off. And if you've come this far, I invite you to take the next step. Click on the next video and continue this journey back to yourself, because sometimes all we need is someone to say, "You're not alone." Until the next video.